Captain James Mitchell walked slowly across the metal floor of what the Galactic Federation called a patrol vessel. The ship stretched out before him like a tired old dog that had seen too many fights. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips, and several lights flickered on and off as if they couldn't decide whether to work or give up entirely. "This is it?" asked Lieutenant Emma Thompson, her voice echoing in the empty corridor. She touched one of the wall panels and it made a hollow sound, like knocking on a tin can. "This is supposed to be our warship." Mitchell didn't answer right away. He was too busy looking at the cracks in the ceiling where someone had tried to patch them with what looked like regular tape. The Federation had been very clear when they handed over the keys to this rust bucket. Humans were new to the galactic community. They hadn't proven themselves yet. They would get equipment that matched their status as newcomers. Chief Engineer Robert Hayes emerged from a maintenance tunnel, oil stains covering his uniform and a look of pure disbelief on his face. "Captain, I've seen the engine room. The fusion reactor is older than my grandfather would have been if he'd lived to be 200. The power systems are held together with spare parts from at least 6 different ship types. And the life support." He shook his head. "Let's just say we better all learn to hold our breath." The ship's artificial intelligence chose that moment to activate, filling the corridor with a mechanical voice that sounded bored. "Welcome aboard the Federation vessel designated as Surplus Inventory Item 7749. This unit was scheduled for scrap processing before being reassigned to human personnel. Current status, 17 critical system failures, 43 major defects, and 112 minor issues requiring attention." Thompson stared at a speaker in the wall. "Did it just call our ship garbage?" "Surplus inventory," the AI corrected helpfully. "Garbage would imply this vessel once had value." Mitchell continued his inspection, opening doors and finding rooms that looked like they hadn't been cleaned since the ship was built. The weapons bay held equipment that other species had probably used during their own Stone Age. Simple projectile launchers that fired metal slugs instead of the energy beams that modern warships carried. The medical bay had basic equipment that wouldn't look out of place in a frontier clinic. Weapons Officer Michael Carter joined them, carrying a data pad that showed the ship's specifications. "Sir, I've been comparing our vessel to the others in the fleet. The Altarian ships have shields that could stop a small moon. The Zentarian cruisers carry weapons that can destroy planets. The Vorthan destroyers move so fast they can attack 3 targets before the first one knows it's under fire." He paused. "Our ship has thicker armor than a civilian transport, barely." They reached the bridge, which was the most depressing room yet. The captain's chair was patched with tape. Half the control panels showed error messages. The main viewing screen had a crack running across it that made everything look broken in half. "The other captains must be laughing at us," said Thompson, slumping into her communication station. "Captain Vextar of the Zentarian fleet probably thinks we're some kind of joke. His ship could vaporize us with one shot from his secondary weapons." Hayes sat down at the engineering station and immediately stood back up when the chair made a concerning creaking sound. "The Federation Council made it pretty clear what they think of us. Humans are untested. Humans are primitive. Humans get the ship that was heading for the scrap yard." Mitchell finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "You know what I see when I look at this ship?" The crew turned to look at him, hoping their captain had found something they had missed. "I see a ship that's been written off. A ship that nobody expects anything from. A ship that every enemy will underestimate because it looks like it should have been destroyed years ago." He sat down in the captain's chair, ignoring the way it squeaked. "I see opportunity." Carter frowned. "Opportunity, sir? When someone expects you to fail, they stop watching you carefully. When someone thinks your weapons are harmless, they don't bother to defend against them properly. When someone believes your ship is worthless, they don't worry about what you might do with it." The AI interrupted again. "Captain, this unit's tactical systems indicate a 0% probability of combat effectiveness against modern vessels. Recommendation: request immediate transfer to a more suitable assignment, such as cargo transport or waste management." Mitchell smiled for the first time since boarding the ship. "AI, cancel all those recommendations. Instead, I want you to run a full analysis of this ship's systems. Not what they are supposed to do, but what they could do if we stopped worrying about safety regulations and started thinking creatively." "Sir," Hayes said slowly, "are you suggesting we modify a ship that's already falling apart?" "I'm suggesting we rebuild it into something nobody will see coming. The Federation gave us a ship they considered worthless. Let's show them what humans can do with worthless things." Thompson looked around the bridge with new eyes. "You mean turn this weakness into a strength?" Exactly. Every other captain in this fleet is commanding a ship built by committee, designed to be safe and predictable. Our ship was built by the lowest bidder and forgotten about for decades. That means we can do things to it that would horrify any reasonable engineer. The crew exchanged glances. Slowly, Carter began to smile. You're talking about breaking rules. I'm talking about making new ones. Hayes rubbed his hands together. Captain, I think I'm starting to like this assignment. Mitchell looked out through the cracked viewing screen at the sleek, powerful ships of the Federation fleet. Soon, he thought, they would learn what happened when humans were given something everyone else considered broken. 3 months had passed since the crew of the Defiant began their work, and the ship no longer looked like the same vessel. Captain Mitchell walked through corridors that hummed with new energy, past rooms where his crew had torn apart every system and rebuilt it according to human logic rather than Federation safety standards. Captain, you need to see this, called Chief Engineer Hayes from the engine room. Mitchell found him standing beside the fusion reactor, which now glowed brighter than it had when the ship was new. Warning lights that had once flashed red now showed steady green, but only because Hayes had reprogrammed them to ignore what other species would consider dangerous levels. The Altarians built this reactor to run forever at 60% power, Hayes explained, his hands dancing over controls that sparked occasionally. They're very careful people. Very safe. But humans? He grinned. We're not that careful. I've pushed this thing to 140% output. The computer keeps telling me the reactor will explode, but it's been saying that for 2 months now. Mitchell watched the energy readings climb higher than the display was designed to show. What happens if you're wrong? Then we'll make a very bright flash and become the shortest-lived crew in Federation history. But if I'm right, we now have more power than ships twice our size. Hayes patted the reactor housing, which was warm to the touch. I've also figured out how to make it run on almost anything combustible. Garbage, spare clothing, even food if we get desperate. The Federation ships need special fuel that costs more than most planets make in a year. We can run on whatever we find floating in space. They moved to the medical bay, where Dr. William Foster had turned half the room into something that looked like a mad scientist's laboratory. Glass containers filled with colorful liquids lined the walls, and strange smells drifted from equipment that definitely wasn't designed for medical use. Doctor, should I be worried about what you're doing in here? Mitchell asked, eyeing a container of bright blue liquid that seemed to glow. Foster held up a small injector filled with clear fluid. Combat stimulant. 1 shot of this and a human can keep fighting for hours even with injuries that would stop other species. I tested it on myself last week when I broke my arm in an accident. Felt nothing until the medicine wore off 12 hours later. That sounds dangerous. Everything we're doing is dangerous. But other species have advantages we don't. They are stronger, faster, or have better technology. This evens the odds. Foster moved to another table covered with gas canisters. I've also been working on atmospheric weapons. Tear gas that works on most alien species, sleep gas that can knock out an entire ship's crew, and a few mixtures that I probably shouldn't describe while we're eating dinner. Mitchell left the doctor to his experiments and found Lieutenant Thompson in what used to be the communications room. Now it looked like a combination between a radio station and a computer repair shop. Cables and circuits covered every surface, and screens showed information flowing in patterns too fast for human eyes to follow. Thompson, please tell me you haven't broken our ability to talk to other ships. She looked up from a device she was building with spare parts. Actually, sir, I've done the opposite. I've figured out how Federation communication systems work, and they're terribly designed. Every ship uses the same protocols, the same security codes, the same everything. It's like they all use the same password. Meaning? Meaning I can listen to any conversation in the fleet. I can send false messages that ships will think are real. I can even take control of some systems on enemy vessels if they're not being careful. She held up her homemade device. This little box can make a Zentarian destroyer think it's receiving orders from its own command center. Can other ships do the same to us? Thompson smiled. Not anymore. I've rewritten our communication systems to use human encryption methods. We can understand everyone else, but they can't understand us unless we want them to. The weapons bay had undergone the most dramatic change. Weapons Officer Carter stood beside what had once been simple projectile launchers but now resembled something built in a junkyard by someone with a dangerous imagination. The Federation uses energy weapons, Carter explained, showing Mitchell ammunition that looked like it had been made from scrap metal. Shields, armor, everything is designed to stop energy beams. But kinetic weapons? Physical objects traveling really fast? Most ships haven't seen those in decades. He loaded a metal sphere into one of the launchers. This used to fire standard projectiles at reasonable speeds. Now it can launch anything that fits in the barrel at speeds that turn metal into liquid. Steel balls, chunks of asteroid, pieces of broken equipment, even garbage. If we fire it fast enough, it becomes a devastating weapon. What about accuracy? That's the beautiful part. Energy weapons travel in straight lines and can be predicted. But solid objects? They can bounce, ricochet, fragment, or change direction. Enemy computers can't calculate what our shots will do because we don't know ourselves until they hit something. Mitchell examined a rack of ammunition that included everything from metal rods to what appeared to be kitchen equipment. This seems like it would be against several Federation treaties. Only if they specifically banned turning dinner plates into projectile weapons. Which they didn't, because nobody was crazy enough to try it before humans joined the fleet. The ship's AI chose that moment to provide an update. Captain, modifications to this vessel now violate 47 safety regulations, 23 equipment standards, and 6 laws of physics. Recommend immediate return to Federation shipyard for restoration to original specifications. Mitchell looked around at his crew, who were all grinning despite the AI's complaints. AI, update your recommendations. New primary objective, determine how to make this ship even more dangerous. Sir, that request goes against all logical programming. Then it's time you learn to think like a human. The emergency signal came through just as Captain Mitchell was reviewing the morning reports. Lieutenant Thompson looked up from her communication station with the kind of expression that meant trouble was coming their way. Sir, we're receiving a distress call from civilian convoy Delta 7. They're under attack by Krillian raiders about 2 hours from our current position. The convoy is carrying medical supplies to the outer colonies. Mitchell studied the tactical display that showed their location relative to the attack. The Defiant was the closest Federation ship, but that wasn't saying much. How many raiders are we talking about? Sensors show 5 Krillian attack vessels. Each one is about 50 meters longer than us and armed with plasma cannons that could cut through our hull like paper. Thompson paused. Sir, the other Federation ships are at least 6 hours away. If we don't help, those civilians are going to die or be sold into slavery. Carter looked up from his weapons console. Captain, this isn't exactly what we hoped our first real test would be. The Krillians are known for being brutal, but they are not stupid. Their ships are fast, well-armed, and their shields can stop anything the Federation usually throws at them. Usually, Mitchell repeated thoughtfully. He opened the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We have civilians under attack and we're the only ship that can help them. I won't lie to you, we're about to face enemies with better ships, better weapons, and more experience than us. But they've never fought humans before, and they have no idea what we've done to this old ship. Prepare for combat. Hayes's voice came over the intercom from the engine room. Captain, I'm pushing the reactor to maximum output. We'll have more power than we've ever had before, but I can't promise the ship won't shake apart. Do it, Mitchell ordered. Thompson, start jamming their communications. I don't want them calling for help. Carter, load everything we've got into the launches. And I mean everything. The Defiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel to find chaos. The 5 Krillian ships moved like pack hunters around 3 civilian transports that were trying desperately to escape. The raiders fired carefully placed shots to disable engines and weapons without destroying their prizes. They wanted the ships intact so they could steal the cargo and capture the crews. This is Captain Mitchell of the Federation vessel Defiant. Break off your attack immediately or face the consequences. The response came in the form of mocking laughter. The lead Krillian ship turned toward them, its weapons charging with deadly energy. The alien captain's voice filled their communication system with arrogant confidence. One pathetic Federation patrol ship? You must be joking. Surrender now and we might let you live long enough to watch us sell your crew to the slave markets. Mitchell smiled coldly. Carter, remember what we discussed about first impressions. Let's show them what humans think about slavery. The Defiant suddenly vented atmosphere from multiple ports along its hull. To the Krillians, it looked like the human ship was already damaged and losing air. What they couldn't see was that Hayes had carefully planned this release to create a cloud of metal debris, ice crystals, and various objects that would confuse enemy sensors. Sir, they're moving in for an easy kill, Thompson reported. Their shields are at full power, but they're not taking us seriously. Perfect. Carter, fire everything. The modified launchers roared to life, sending a stream of projectiles into the debris cloud. Steel balls, chunks of asteroid ore, pieces of broken equipment, and even modified kitchen utensils flew toward the Krillian ships at incredible speed. The Raiders' energy shields, designed to deflect plasma beams and laser fire, had never been tested against solid objects traveling at such velocities. The first Krillian ship's shield flickered and failed as a steel sphere punched through it like it was made of paper. The projectile continued through the hull, creating a hole that vented atmosphere and sent the ship spinning out of control. "Impossible," came the shocked voice of the Krillian commander. "No one uses kinetic weapons anymore." "We do," Mitchell replied calmly. "Thompson, flood their communication channels with interference. I don't want them coordinating their attacks." The battle became a nightmare for the Krillians. Every time they tried to target the Defiant with their advanced weapons, the human ship would change course in ways that defied military logic. Mitchell ordered maneuvers that no sane captain would attempt, flying directly toward enemy fire, spinning the ship to use the armored sections as shields, and even ramming smaller debris into enemy vessels. Dr. Foster had prepared special gas canisters that the ship vented directly at enemy vessels when they came close. The Krillian crews found their ships filling with tear gas and sleep agents that made it impossible to fight effectively. "They are fighting like madmen," screamed one Krillian pilot before his ship was disabled by a chunk of metal that had bounced off an asteroid and struck his engines. Hayes kept the reactor running far beyond safe limits, providing power for maneuvers and weapons fire that should have been impossible for a ship of their size. Warning alarms screamed constantly, but the human crew had learned to ignore them weeks ago. When the smoke cleared, 3 Krillian ships were disabled and drifting in space. The other 2 were in full retreat, broadcasting confused reports about humans who fought without regard for their own safety and used weapons that civilized species had abandoned centuries ago. "Convoy Delta 7, this is Captain Mitchell. The raiders have been neutralized. Are you in need of assistance?" The grateful voice of the convoy leader filled their communication system. "Captain, we don't know how you did that, but you saved our lives. Those were some of the most experienced raiders in this sector, and you defeated them with an old patrol ship." Mitchell looked around his bridge, where his crew was grinning despite the damage indicators that showed systems pushed far beyond their limits. "Just doing our job. Safe travels, convoy." As the civilian ships continued toward their destination, Thompson intercepted Krillian communications. "Sir, they're calling us demons. They say humans fight like the ship doesn't matter and crew safety is meaningless." "Good," Mitchell replied. "Let them spread that story. The next time pirates see a human ship, they might think twice about attacking." Admiral Victoria Sterling's shuttle docked with the Defiant exactly 72 hours after the Krillian incident. She had come to investigate reports that seemed too strange to believe. A human crew using an obsolete patrol ship to defeat experienced raiders in ways that violated everything she knew about space combat. The moment she stepped aboard, Sterling knew something was very wrong. The corridor walls vibrated with energy that felt dangerous, and the air itself seemed to hum with barely controlled power. Warning lights flashed constantly, but the human crew walked past them as if they were decorative features. "Captain Mitchell," she said as he greeted her at the airlock, "I need to understand what happened during your engagement with the Krillians. The reports I've received don't match any known combat tactics." Mitchell led her through the ship, and Sterling noticed immediately that nothing looked like standard Federation equipment. Control panels had been rebuilt with human modifications, safety barriers had been removed from dangerous systems, and warning labels had been covered with tape or simply ignored entirely. "Admiral, we did what we had to do to save those civilians. The Krillians were experienced fighters with better ships, so we used different methods." They stopped at the weapons bay, where Weapons Officer Carter was loading ammunition that looked like it had been made in a scrap yard. Sterling stared at projectiles that included metal spheres, chunks of rock, and what appeared to be kitchen utensils that had been sharpened to deadly points. "Officer Carter, are those dinner forks?" she asked, pointing at a rack of modified eating utensils. "Yes. We discovered that common silverware, when fired at sufficient velocity, can penetrate most ship hulls. The Krillian shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not flying cutlery." Sterling picked up one of the modified forks, noting how the human crew had welded additional weight to the handle and sharpened the points to razor edges. "This is completely against Federation weapons regulations." "Actually, we checked. The regulations ban specific types of energy weapons, explosive devices, and biological agents. But there's nothing that specifically prohibits using tableware as ammunition." They moved to the engine room, where Chief Engineer Hayes was monitoring systems that glowed with power levels that made Sterling's instruments scream warnings. The fusion reactor operated far beyond anything she had seen on modern ships, and the entire engineering section felt like standing next to a barely controlled explosion. Engineer Hayes, these power readings are impossible. This reactor should have melted down weeks ago. Hayes wiped oil from his hands and grinned. The Federation builds things to last forever and never break down. That's admirable, but it also means they never push systems to see what they can really do. We've discovered that most equipment can handle much more stress than the safety manuals suggest. And if you're wrong? Then we'll make a very impressive explosion and solve several problems at once. But so far, human intuition has been more accurate than alien caution. Sterling watched Hayes adjust controls that sparked and smoked, maintaining equipment that should have been replaced months ago. The human engineer treated potentially lethal machinery with the casual confidence of someone fixing a broken kitchen appliance. Dr. Foster showed her the medical bay, which now resembled a chemistry laboratory more than a healing center. Glass containers filled with various substances lined the walls, and the air smelled of chemicals that made Sterling's eyes water. "Doctor, what exactly are you manufacturing in here?" Foster held up a small injector filled with bright green liquid. "Combat stimulants, atmospheric weapons, emergency medical supplies, and various substances that help humans function under conditions that would disable other species. For example, this injection allows our crew to work effectively even with broken bones or severe injuries." That sounds extremely dangerous. Everything about combat is dangerous, Admiral. The question is whether we want to be dangerous to our enemies or just to ourselves. We've chosen to be dangerous to our enemies. Sterling examined containers labeled with warnings in human languages that she couldn't read, but the skull symbols were universally understood. "Doctor, some of these appear to be lethal toxins. Only to species that aren't human. We've discovered that humans have remarkably strong resistance to many substances that would kill other Federation members. What's poison to a Krillian might just give us a mild headache." Lieutenant Thompson demonstrated the communication modifications that allowed the ship to intercept and manipulate enemy transmissions. Sterling watched in amazement as Thompson showed how she could make enemy ships think they were receiving orders from their own commanders. "Lieutenant, this is electronic warfare at a level that most species consider unethical." We prefer to think of it as creative communication. We're not lying to them, exactly. We're just helping them understand what we want them to do. Sterling spent an hour examining systems that violated safety protocols, weapons that shouldn't exist, and modifications that turned an obsolete patrol ship into something that defied classification. When she finished her inspection, she found Captain Mitchell on the bridge, calmly reading reports while sitting in a chair that was held together with metal tape and hope. "Captain, I need to understand something. How is this ship still functional? By every regulation and safety standard in the Federation, it should have exploded, fallen apart, or simply stopped working weeks ago." Mitchell looked up from his reports. "Admiral, the Federation builds things the safe way. Humans build things the way that works. Sometimes those are the same thing, and sometimes they are not. Your crew operates equipment that could kill them at any moment." "Yes? But it could also kill our enemies, and we've decided that's an acceptable trade." Sterling looked around the bridge at displays showing power levels that were impossible, weapon systems that shouldn't work, and crew members who treated mortal danger as a minor inconvenience. "Captain, what you've done here goes against everything we know about proper ship operations." "I know, Admiral. That's why it works." Sterling left the Defiant with a report that would puzzle Federation officials for months. She had found a crew that had turned military science into an art form, transforming weakness into strength through methods that no reasonable species would attempt. As her shuttle pulled away, she could see the human ship continuing its patrol, looking like a piece of junk that somehow refused to fall apart. But now she knew the truth, it wasn't junk anymore. It was something entirely new. The space around Centauri Station erupted in flashes of light as the Vorthan hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 300 warships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their black hulls gleaming like beetles under the distant stars. Each vessel was twice the size of the largest Federation ship, armed with weapons that could crack planets and protected by shields that had never been broken. Captain Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the tactical display as red dots representing enemy ships filled the screen. The Federation fleet was already moving to intercept, their sleek vessels forming battle lines according to military textbooks written centuries ago. "Sir," Thompson reported from her communication station, Fleet Command is ordering all ships to engage the enemy fleet in standard formation. We're being assigned to evacuate civilians from the outer colonies. Mitchell studied the enemy formation. The Vorthan ships moved with mechanical precision, each vessel knowing exactly where it belonged and what its role would be in the coming battle. Their commander clearly expected a conventional fight against conventional enemies using conventional tactics. Thompson, acknowledge the evacuation order. Then switch to our private communication channel and patch me through to the whole crew. The lieutenant's fingers danced over controls that sparked and hummed with barely contained energy. You're connected, sir. All hands, this is the captain. In about 10 minutes, we're going to do something that will either save the Federation or get us all killed in a very spectacular way. The Vorthans have better ships, better weapons, and more experience than anyone in this fleet. But they've never fought humans before, and they have no idea what we've turned this old ship into. He paused, looking around the bridge at crew members who had spent months learning to make the impossible work. Hayes, give me everything the reactor has. Foster, prepare your special atmosphere packages. Carter, load every launcher with everything we've got. Thompson, I want you ready to flood their communication channels with chaos. The Defiant began moving away from the main battle, appearing to limp toward the civilian evacuation zones. Mitchell ordered the ship to vent small amounts of atmosphere and broadcast distress signals on multiple frequencies. To outside observers, it looked like a damaged vessel fleeing the fight. The Vorthan flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Iron Dominion, noticed the retreating Federation ship. Its commander, a veteran warrior named Thakmor, saw an opportunity for an easy victory that would boost morale among his forces. Pursue that damaged vessel, he ordered. We will destroy it before joining the main battle. Let the Federation watch one of their ships die while they fight uselessly against our superior forces. The Iron Dominion broke formation and accelerated toward the Defiant, its weapon systems charging with deadly energy. Behind it followed two escort destroyers, their crews eager to participate in what appeared to be target practice against a helpless enemy. Sir, they're taking the bait, Thompson reported. 3 ships breaking off from the main fleet to pursue us. The flagship and 2 destroyers. Mitchell nodded. Perfect. Carter, are you ready? All launchers loaded with our finest junk, sir. Steel balls, modified kitchenware, chunks of asteroid, and several items that I'm not sure what they used to be. Hayes called from the engine room. Captain, reactor is at 160% and climbing. I've disabled every safety system we had left. If this doesn't work, we're going to become a very bright star. The Vorthan ships closed to what their commander considered optimal firing range. The Iron Dominion's main weapons locked onto the human vessel, preparing to deliver a killing blow that would vaporize the Defiant in seconds. Now, Mitchell said quietly. The seemingly crippled human ship suddenly blazed with hidden power. Armored plates that had appeared damaged fell away to reveal weapon ports that glowed with lethal energy. The reactor's massive output fed systems that shouldn't exist, powering modifications that turned the Defiant into something between a warship and a guided missile. Carter's launchers fired everything at once. Steel spheres, modified eating utensils, chunks of rock, and pieces of the ship's own non-essential systems flew toward the Vorthan ships at velocities that turned simple metal into devastating weapons. The enemy shields, designed to stop energy beams and plasma bolts, had never been tested against solid projectiles moving at such incredible speeds. Impossible. Thakmor screamed as his flagship shields failed under the impact of flying cutlery and scrap metal. What kind of primitive species fights with garbage? Foster's atmospheric weapons activated, flooding space around the enemy ships with gases that seeped through damaged hull breaches. The Vorthan crews found their ships filling with substances that made breathing difficult and thinking impossible. Thompson's electronic warfare systems took control of the enemy vessel's communication networks, sending false orders and conflicting information that left the Vorthan crews confused and unable to coordinate their defense. But Mitchell's masterstroke was yet to come. The Defiant, powered by its overloaded reactor and driven by human determination, suddenly accelerated directly toward the Iron Dominion. Ramming spikes extended from the hull, and the ship's entire structure was converted into a weapon that struck the enemy flagship like a hammer hitting glass. The collision should have destroyed both ships, but Hayes had calculated the impact perfectly. The Defiant's reinforced sections absorbed the damage while the Vorthan dreadnought's hull cracked like an eggshell under the assault. Boarding pods launched from hidden compartments, carrying human crew members armed with weapons that no civilized species would consider using. They fought their way through the enemy ship using tactics that horrified the Vorthans, humans who ignored injuries that would stop other species, who used their own blood as weapons, and who treated mortal combat as a problem to be solved rather than a battle to be won. Within an hour, the Vorthan flagship was captured. The two escort destroyers, seeing their command vessel fall to what appeared to be a suicidal attack, transmitted desperate warnings to their fleet before retreating in panic. The main Vorthan force, hearing reports of humans who turned garbage into weapons and used their own ships as ammunition, began a fighting withdrawal that turned into a full retreat. Later, Admiral Sterling found Captain Mitchell sitting in his patched captain's chair, calmly filling out after-action reports while his crew worked to repair systems that had been pushed far beyond their breaking point. "Captain, the Federation Council wants to give you a fleet of modern warships as a reward for your victory." Mitchell looked up and smiled. "That's very kind, Admiral, but we'll stick with what we know. Besides," he patted a bulkhead that was held together with welds and hope, "we're just getting started with the improvements.